Who is Dr. Aafia Siddiqui and what crime has she committed? Where has the case of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui reached? Would she ever be released? How well is she doing mentally, physically, through all the abuse and torture she goes through day-to-day basis? Why did America arrest Dr. Aafia Siddiqui and why is there no news about her for years? And many more topics about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, who spends many years in American prison, all this from the lawyer of many innocent prisoners of Guantanamo and many more prisons in America with himself, Mr. Clive Smith. So, shall we talk about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui?
Well, certainly.
Okay.
So, I took on Aafia Siddiqui's case a year ago at the request of her sister. And I've represented over 100 people in this so-called war on terror. And of all the people who have been tortured and abused by the United States, she's the worst. I don't think, Omar, you have kids, right?
No.
No, not yet, but you will. And I have a son. His name's Wilf. And the thing that's unique about Aafia is she was sold to the Americans, again for a bounty, for $55,000. But she was kidnapped not just by herself, but with her 3 children. Mm-hmm. And she had 3 kids, and one was 6 months old, Suleiman, one was 3 years old, that was Mariam, and one was 6 years old, that was Ahmed. And as they were kidnapped in Karachi, they dropped Suleiman on his head and apparently killed him. So how would you feel about a child of yours being killed in front of you?
I'd be angry.
You'd be angry, but
Yeah.
you'd also be pretty traumatized, right? But then the next 2, with Mariam and Ahmed, they took them 1,000 kilometers from Karachi to Kabul. And these 2 kids were born in America, so they were American citizens. And the American government then put Mariam into a relation. She was adopted, forcibly adopted by some Americans who were white Christians, right? Mm-hmm. On the theory that being a white Christian American was somehow better and superior to being a Pakistani Muslim. How do you feel about that?
Upset.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where are they now?
Well, so Mariam was adopted into this family, and Mariam, we got her out eventually, but it was 7 years. But I desperately need information about her. And she was this little girl, age 3 to age 11, who was here in Afghanistan. She only spoke English. She didn't speak even Urdu, and she didn't speak the local languages. And she was in a place here somewhere, I don't know where yet. And I'm desperate for people. There must be people in Afghanistan who knew about this little girl. And I'm desperate to find out about that. So I hope if there's anyone watching this program, they'll get in touch and let us know. Now, in a way, what happened to Ahmed was even more shocking. He was brought to Kabul. Age 6, he was put into a prison here, an Afghan prison, where he spent the next 5 years. And again, he was given different names. He was told that if he used his name, Ahmed Siddiqui, they'd kill him. And this is coming from the Americans. And so he went generally under the name Ihsan Ali. And again, he didn't speak any of the local languages. He spoke English and he spoke Urdu. And again, I desperately want to hear from people who knew about that back then, because eventually his aunt got him back through some work with the Red Cross. In the meantime, Aafia was taken to Bagram Air Force Base, and the United States to this day lies about that and says she was just wandering around Pakistan and Afghanistan, but she wasn't. And we've had some help from some wonderful Afghans who have told us about being in Bagram themselves and about how they came across this woman who was a Pakistani woman, Aafia Siddiqui, prisoner 650, they thought she was. And she was being held there, and she was tortured, this poor woman was tortured by the Americans, where they had a one-way glass, and behind the glass they had children who they were mistreating, and they were telling her that was their children. Can you imagine as a parent what that was like? So poor old Aafia went through this, and just a nightmare. And when the Americans discovered that she really wasn't a member of Al-Qaeda and she wasn't a big-time terrorist, they wanted to get rid of her. And they tried to get her killed as a suicide bomber, just stupid thing. What they did was they sent her to Ghazni, and they then called in a tip that this woman, they told Aafia she could have her daughter Mariam back if she went to Ghazni, and sat in front of this mosque, the Khalid bin Walid mosque. And she sat there for 6 hours thinking someone was going to bring her daughter to her. But instead, someone had called in saying she was a suicide bomber. And then all these people with AK-47s surrounded her, and they were going to kill her. And then the US could have said, well, she really was a suicide bomber, she was an evil person, whatever. But instead, there was this fabulous guy, I really respect him, a guy called Mohammed Mohammadi, who was a tailor who spoke Urdu and who could talk to her. And he got between her and the guns, and he said, no, you can't kill this woman. And that's what saved her life. But then she was subsequently in an incident there. She was shot. She was the victim. And the Americans said she was the bad person. And they took her all the way to America, gave her this totally sham of a trial. And she's now doing 86 years in Fort Worth, Texas, in a prison. And, you know, look, Guantanamo has been horrible, but it's nothing compared to what happens to this poor woman.
Yep.
So she's held in FMC Carswell in Fort Worth, where she's been raped twice. She's being sexually assaulted the whole time. This prison is full of these deranged American guards who have, 13 of them have been convicted of the criminal offense of rape in the last few years. And so I went to see her last year. And, you know, I was busy, of course, but once you meet this poor woman, you can't say no.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm going to spend however long it takes to get this poor woman out of that prison and back home. But I really need help. So if anyone knows anything about her time in Afghanistan, I really need that help.
Yeah, of course.
Can I just say on that, I really appreciate the help that I've had from the Afghan authorities who have been, you know, they're only interested in justice, nothing else. But I think it's really good of them to be so helpful.
What was the USA hoping to gain by hiding her or holding her for so long and torturing her?
The problem with all of these folks, I mean, this is a statistic, right? Of the 780 prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, the American government said they were all the worst of the worst terrorists in the world. So far, and we haven't finished yet, but so far we've exonerated 767 of them, right? That's 99% of the prisoners in Guantanamo. We've proven to the satisfaction, even of the US government, that they were innocent. So what happened when I sell you for money, if I sell you, Omar, I hate to do this, but if I sell you to the Americans for money and make up a story saying you're a terrorist, are you a terrorist? Okay, let's say I slap you. Are you a terrorist?
Yeah.
You're a wimp, you really are. But I'm going to go up until I start taking your hands and pulling the fingernails out. And then, you know, the very worst thing that the Americans did, in my experience, was to one of my clients, Binyam Mohammed, where they took him to Morocco, where they had a razor blade taken to his genitals, because he was very obstinate. I really love Binyam, but he's a very obstinate guy, and he wouldn't agree to what they said. So, you know, what the Americans did was they bought people for bounties with a false story about them being a terrorist. They then tortured you, and you were a hopeless person. You admitted you were a terrorist in a minute. And then they think they got the real person, right? They honestly don't think they're taking an innocent person and putting them in prison, but they are. And then they don't give them a legal right to prove they're innocent. And so they sit in Guantanamo Bay or in where Aafia is, and they rot there forever. And then they try to deny them lawyers, so they have no legal rights. So this is just a system that's designed to torment people, and it's just so wrong.
So is there a reason for the secrecy regarding her case?
The reason for the secrecy is twofold. One is, if they told the truth about the people in Guantanamo, that actually these are not all terrorists, they'd look pretty stupid and they'd look like they're not winning their war on terror. So they had secrecy so no one knew what was happening and they could just lie about it. And our philosophy from the very beginning was to open it up to public inspection on the theory that if we open it up, they'll be so embarrassed they close it down. But the other reason with Aafia was this. I think most of your viewers will be particularly appalled about what the United States has done to a woman, you know, abusing her in the ways that the United States has. And you remember there have been some things America did that were just really terrible, like, you know, throwing the Quran, the Holy Quran, into the toilet, and, you know, desecration of things that are just mindless and awful. And as a result of that, it's caused terrible anger. And there have been riots and people have, you know, attacked the US consulate and so forth. You know, when these things come out, they anger people so much. Now, I don't want that anger, right?
Of course.
I don't think there's anything to be gained by us all hating each other. And I wouldn't be telling you these stories right now if it weren't for the fact that they're not setting this woman free.
Yep.
If they set her free, you know, let's just get her home and get her treated nicely. Until that time comes, I'm going to tell the truth to people, no matter what happens. But the reason the Americans don't want you to know about this is because it is going to inspire great anger when people know the truth. And probably it should.
What are the allegations against her?
Well, the allegation is that she attempted to shoot an American officer. She was in this room in Ghazni, and the Americans said that a bunch of soldiers, American soldiers, came into this room, and one of them put his M4 rifle down, and this little woman grabbed it up, flipped off the safety catch, and started trying to shoot them.
So is that true?
Well, I mean, do you know where the safety catch is on an M4 rifle? Well, neither do I, and neither did she. No, that's not true. Now, you know, when you look at the physical evidence, the US said that these two holes in the wall were bullet holes. Well, fortunately, there was a press conference earlier that day in that same room, and those two holes were already there, so they clearly weren't created later by guns. There was no gunshot residue on her. There was no gunshot residue on the curtain near her. There were no shells from an M4 rifle. There were no bullets from an M4 rifle. It just didn't happen. What really happened was this. She was being held by the Afghan National Police, and they had her in this room behind a curtain, and then she heard some American voices. And Aafia speaks good English. She understood they were American. She was terrified. She'd just spent 5 years being tortured in Bagram. She was terrified that they were going to take her back there. So she peeked around the curtain to see who was there. And one of them saw her and said, "She's on the loose," and pulled his gun and shot her twice. Now, at that point, that soldier had committed a criminal offense because she was not threatening anyone. And he would have faced a trial, and another American soldier had just been prosecuted. So they got together and made up this totally nonsense story. And they took her to New York, where they have a 99.5% conviction rate. She had no real witnesses for herself, and she was convicted and sentenced to 86 years in prison.
So how far are you into a case of being released?
Well, everything about these, there's a lot of work, this stuff, right? And I've been working on it now for a year, and I've been to see her 7 or 8 times. But the biggest thing is all the evidence is here in Afghanistan. And so I've been here a couple of times, and people have been very helpful. But it's hard to find this evidence. We've done quite well, thanks to these wonderful people who have been so helpful. But I'm going to come back again in May, I hope, and carry on. But we really need to get her out, and we need to get her out by the end of this year. Because the way America works is this. We've got an election in America on November the 5th. Between November the 5th and the next president being sworn in, there's 10 weeks. And that's 10 weeks when either Joe Biden has been re-elected, so he doesn't care, or he's lost, so he doesn't care. So he's then got 10 weeks in which to do justice without any political implications. And we need him to agree to set Aafia free at that point. What I've proposed is that we should swap her for Dr. Shakil Afridi. Dr. Shakil Afridi was the doctor who helped the Americans to track down bin Laden. Now, whatever you feel about that, the Americans want him, and we want Aafia. So if they want to swap each other, that would just be just fine. And then we'd get Aafia home and get her the trauma help that she really needs.
So how is she cooperating? How is she doing in the jail?
I don't know about you, Emma, but if I've tortured you for 5 years, I've killed one of your children, I've kidnapped the others, and I've abused them for a few years, how are you going to be?
Well, not well.
Not well. No, well, that's true. I mean, my father was mentally ill, right? My father was bipolar, and he was a brilliant guy, got a degree at Cambridge, and you could have very good conversations with him. But there was just a part of my dad that was not all there. Aafia, if you talk to her about her PhD thesis on education, for example, she's a very, very brilliant woman, and you can have a great conversation. If you start talking to her about the years of torture and what's happened to her children, she's so traumatized that it's impossible for her to really think about it. So this is someone who just needs to be out of prison, and she needs to be getting the love and attention of her sister, who's this fabulous doctor in Karachi. We need to get her back there and get her some help and get her back in the real world.
And how is her family coping with her all the way over in New York?
Well, her sister, Fauzia, didn't see Aafia for 20 years, because you've got to understand, even the two kids who we've now got back, and they're great kids, you know, they're now 25 and 27, they've got American passports, but they don't go to America because of what happened to them. And Fauzia couldn't go to America, they wouldn't give her a visa. Now, I bullied the US government a bit and got her a visa, and I got her in there, and she did get to see her sister. But to see your beloved younger sister in a prison like FMC Carswell was just really heartbreaking for both of them. I mean, I sat there while they were having their meeting because I was there to make sure it went okay. And the two of them were singing little nursery songs that they used to sing together in Karachi, which was very sweet, but it was surreal because they're in this awful, awful prison.
Have you got any message for Afghan people that will be watching this today?
I do have a message for all the Afghan people. The first is, there's many of us in the West who think that what was done to Afghanistan was absolutely wrong. And the fact that there are still sanctions on Afghanistan is absolutely wrong. And for that, I can only say that the West is wrong to do it. But what we mustn't do is dwell on hatred. What we've got to do is work together towards a peaceful and better world. And that's what I want to do. I mean, one thing I want to do is bring a cricket team here to tour Afghanistan, but I love cricket. I'm sorry, you'll have to forgive me for that. I love the Afghan team. The Afghan team beat the English team in the World Cup. They beat the Pakistan team in the World Cup. I was supporting them. I was so proud of them. And we need to work on doing good things with each other and not remembering all the hatred.
Yeah. All right then, Mr. Clive Smith, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you.